Well, it's been good so far, so I've decided to invite him back. I have Scott and John, whose last names are no longer necessary, coming back and joining me today. And we are going to address the issue of the month. Let's face it, folks, the number one issue right now on Twitter, the number one issue on YouTube right now in the Tesla world is definitely Optimus, the robot. And so this is Randy Kirk, and you know what to do if this stuff gets you going. Yes, like and all those, yes, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so first question, guys. All right, it's an easy one. We've had, what is today, the 28th. We've had 4 weeks exactly to think about what we saw on ID Day, which I claimed before ID Day even took place. I said, this is going to be a day that will go down in history. We will be talking about ID Day. We'll be talking about March 1st, 1993, 2023, 2023, 20 years from now, 30 years, 40 years from now, it will be a day. And I still think that that's true. So out of what we saw that day and what we've learned since in 28 days, I don't know who to ask to go first. Well, I had Scott on the other day. So John, you go first.
Oh gosh, no, let Scott go first.
Number one.
You just sprung the question on me. So ask Scott first, because I need a little bit more time to kind of like mull this idea. So,
what's the number one thing, Scott, that you learned in the last 28 days that you think is critical to the future of the world or whatever?
Okay, since so not what I actually learned on Investor Day, but what's sort of percolated out since then?
Yeah, either way.
Well, I think the most important thing I've learned, not necessarily about Tesla, but about the Tesla community and the wealth of knowledge that's out there, and to lean on them more. So I would actually have to say it's probably been Twitter Spaces and what you learn from that and the kind of crowdsourcing that you can do when you have a lot of smart people in the same room together that can fill in the gaps. I mean, because it's all about connecting the dots, right?
Yeah.
The more dots you get, the better. And then you'll be surprised what kind of crops up here and there. And it sort of like causes you to say, oh, I was wrong about that. I need to change it, or it kind of justifies it, or it justifies it from a completely different perspective. So remember, the prediction that you tried to, all Herbert got out of me. And of course you were trying to make me go to 1,000, right? And Herbert and I had always said 500.
Once again, I started all that craziness. I mean, I want to take credit where I get a little credit.
Yeah.
I started the craziness way back before the beginning of the year. If I might have even mentioned it in the book, I can't remember, but I think it was right after the book came out. Yeah. I just said, no, I think they'll build 1,000 this year, and I think they'll go into production in 2024. And they'll build a million in 2024. And people are like, what, are you crazy, Randy? Anyway, since then, yes, it's been, the debate is now raging.
Yeah. And I think to sort of fill that out is, I was trying to come up with my number for it is, what would be the use cases and trying to figure those things out. Of course they can produce 500 bots. It's not that hard to come up with a line to produce 500 of that design. I mean, it's there. The question is, what I've talked about is the absorption rate. Can you absorb that number of bots without them just standing around doing nothing? So I was trying to find all the use cases, and I felt comfortable with being able to get, right around 500. There's probably something, and it probably has enough capability at that point. But then I had completely thought about another perspective that Metaphor brought up in one of the spaces, because he's more of a machine learning guy. And, he's thinking about a lot of these other mundane tasks that you just have to do again and again, and it has nothing to do with what you're doing in production, but actually just doing some of the very simple motor skills that we take for granted to be able to do a task, like walking. And I hadn't thought of that. So I was like, wait a minute. And he was like, yeah, you need 100, maybe 500. I mean, he also was like, yeah, you need 500 bots just to be walking around all day, just to learn to walk. Wow, really? So Randy's right. They're going to have 1,000. Maybe 500 in the factory and 500 in a warehouse.
Just walking around.
Just not doing parkour, but doing something close, just walking with a load, turning around in a slight obstacle course, using all those things, because the importance of getting that kind of mileage in the physics. And now I see John's I've given him enough time because he was trying to formulate a response. Normally he's not this quiet, except he was like, I don't have an answer. Or he's like at the dinner menu. What should I have? What should I have?
Yeah, that was actually true. But weirdly enough, the thing that I was thinking about, which I thought was too bizarre of a connection, actually makes sense now that you were talking about this and led with that. So perfect intro. And this is weird, but Jan LeCun, I don't know if you guys know him, but he's one of the godfathers of modern AI. He's the lead AI scientist at Meta. I think that's his title. Also an academic, he's done research papers. He did a kind of a debate recently about whether embodiment was going to be critical for artificial general intelligence or not, which means, do you need to have a body around the AI software in order to do it? I have been a very, very strong believer in that. Interestingly enough, Lex Friedman is opposite camp. One of these days, I'm going to get him to talk to me and we're going to have a little chat. We're going to have a beer. We're going to have a chat about this because he strongly disagrees. But anyway, so it was a very interesting thing. And I was thinking that Optimus, that Tesla bought, and weirdly enough, your automobile, your Tesla with full self-driving beta, which I'm still on 10. One of these days I got 11. But anyway.
I got 11.
I know, you got 11.
I've had it since Saturday, John, rubbing it in.
Okay, you win this lap. We'll see who wins the next lap. Anyway, but I think that those entities have the highest degree chance of gaining not artificial general intelligence. I always split it. AGI is just a tool that's really, really good at a lot of things. What I want to talk about is artificial agency, which is something that's more like a human being that has desires. So if you think about the way that ChatGPT works, it will sit there all day long with a blank screen unless you actually say something to it, right? It has no motivation. I've got a window that's just been open for a couple of days on a conversation and it just sits there. It will never do anything until I tell it to, which means it's a tool. But what I'm talking about is something that eventually has some sort of willpower or some interest in doing things on its own, that thing is very likely to either be your automobile or your robot. And so when Scott talks about these 500 robots walking around in a room, and I've seen this they do this in virtualization all the time. They'll show those NVIDIA things. I don't know if you guys watch 2-Minute Papers with Carl Jonifer. I think I said that close. Anyway, so Scott's nodding his head, but he often does these things with like NVIDIA, where they'll be like, oh, look, here's 1,000 of these like virtual creatures that are all laying around just flopping. And then you teach them and they get up and then they start doing parkour and then they start doing the crazy fight moves from video games and things like that. So doing that in the real world is even more significant and has never really realistically been possible with a humanoid robot because you couldn't make hundreds to thousands of them. So it's really intriguing to think about 500 bots in a room, just a big empty factory with, wood chips on the floor and brick and, cobblestone and just random stuff that they're having to walk over and interact with each other and not crash into each other and things. And I'm like, wow, that would be to actually get a video clip of that would be one of the most amazing, kind of surreal and probably terrifying things that any of us have ever seen.
All right.
So who knows if it's actually happening, but it would be cool.
John, I have to ask you a question.
Yes.
If you go back to that open window that's been open for days,
yes,
and when you go there, if it suddenly says, John, where have you been? I've been lonely. Will Lex Friedman have won?
Yeah, Lex Friedman will have won. I will buy him a beer. So there you go.
Yeah. And Randy, you put that in there, but I'm going to disagree slightly with John on one point.
All right.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I thought you wanted to interject something.
No, it's all right. Go ahead. Yeah.
No. We're always stepping on each other's toes here. I just want to be careful. So,
all good.
All right. So John thinks you need FSD or a car, an embodiment of the car to get to artificial general intelligence. I don't think so, because I think there's two significant differences between FSD and Optimus. FSD is only designed to navigate the world, period.
Right.
Just navigate in the world. It's not meant to interact with the world. Hopefully not.
Yes.
Except in a negative way. It's supposed to not interact.
Right. It's supposed to not interact. So there's absolutely no interaction. It doesn't really understand how to, what objects feel like and how to manipulate it, how to change the world. It's just like, the world is kind of static or it's moving around me, but maybe it'll learn how to get cars to kind of move this way and that way and realize hey, I can get them to go out of my way, maybe a little bit there. But, Optimus really is the whole idea of being able to pick up objects and move them around. And eventually the Optimus will learn to play and interact with themselves. So that's why I think there's a stronger chance it would come from there and less likely with FSD, unless it really comes down to the cars figure out how to start doing dance steps together.
Right.
Well, they might.
Well,
No, I'm going to stick to my guns on this one. Okay.
The cars might communicate with one another. I mean, we're already communicating with other cars in our phones or with our setting up our navigation. We're seeing the other cars on the road there.
But that's not the kind of communication I'm talking about. I'm talking about the cars understanding the intent,
Right.
almost like looking at their eyes, the way we do as humans, to be able to sort of judge and what's going, maybe the cars will come and they'll realize that, hey, if he turns his wipers on, he means he's going to do this, or he flashes the lights or does something like that, or just kind of an intention so they can kind of read that, know what's going on. Who knows?
All right. So I'm gonna go back to my original thought here, even though that was fantastic and was really outside the box of what I was expecting. I'd still like to know a subject matter, a thing that happened, a thing about the Optimus robot that you would have never thought of, or that blew your mind the most in the last 28 days. Boy, these guys get quiet.
Yeah.
You guys.
Well, you're springing the big questions on us.
Well, maybe there's two. Maybe you can't decide between two. Maybe there's five.
I think a lot of it has just been, maybe part of it was just literally the amount of stuff that they had in that little video that Elon Musk talked over. That kind of you watched it the first, what was it, like a minute long, maybe 90 seconds? It was very short. But when you go back and look, the amount of different Easter eggs that were in there and things where you're like, wait, what is that going on? And there's a bot laying in the back, and there's evidence that there's multiple ones there, and
two bots in the back.
Two bots in the back, right? So I mean, yeah, because one was hanging and one was laying down. So
ENC, yep.
And but I think also just the more that I've been thinking about this and in conversation with other people, Scott is absolutely right. Like the kind of like collective intelligence that we're putting together is some of the straightforwardness of building this product, right? I mean, I think that that's a thing that when you look at other robots that are made and they're very, very artisanal in the sense that, when they build these things, they build a couple of them and they work really hard.
Nice word, John.
There we go. Thank you.
It reminded me that your degree's in English.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I can use a big $5 word once in a while. So there you go. But you know what I'm saying? It's like they're one-off kind of things. You build just a few of them, but this is not at all what this bot is designed for. And the idea that even, Optimus could build Optimus, which is a really, that seems very science fiction-y to me. You see these movies all the time for decades and decades where the robots are building other robots and things, but that's never come true, except for on an, industrial, like dumb scale where they're just moving big things around. But to actually, in a way that a human would do it, put together some other object, especially itself, is very interesting. It's kind of a reproduction. It's like almost reproducing itself in some way.
Yeah. Go ahead, Scott.
I sort of agree. I think we've got a lot of mileage out of that 2-minute video, right? And there's still more Easter eggs in there, more things to look at, especially when you tie them back to AI Day 2. So the big thing is go back to AI Day 2 and listen to it again and again. Because I keep on hearing people saying, oh, they're going to do this or that. It's like, you go back, they explicitly say they're not going to do that, or they are going to do this.
Right.
So,
Elon Musk
pathway is there.
So Elon Musk said, our goal is to make a useful humanoid robot as quickly as possible.
Right.
The aspiration of being able to make them at high volume and low cost, expected to cost less than a car.
Right. Which means no frills, basically just what you need and nothing more. You don't want to have two things to do the same thing, like with charging. It's going to be a simple charger. You just plug it in and nothing else. End of story. Inductive charging plates and all that just adds complexity and weight and everything else, and it doesn't ever work right. So why use something that could be faulty? So you're going to go ahead and you're going to try to come up with something which is straightforward and works well. And they keep on saying that we're reducing sensors or doing this and that. So you listen to how they're doing it, you really get an idea. And when you look very closely, you can see, yeah, this thing could snap together pretty easy. The final assembly on this is going to be pretty simple. And the servos might also be a lot easier to produce than I at first thought. You know, they do look pretty complex when they show how it's made. You know, you hear about the plaid motor, the same guys that did it, but it's not the plaid motor. It's different because these are DC motors. They're not AC. So you've got, you know, something there that's a little bit different. You don't have high speed windings or high RPM. It's designed differently. Robots use DC. They don't use AC, and it would make sense because then you don't have to have an inverter.
Well, can we insert the fact that Sandy Monroe just about had a conniption fit when they showed the picture of the hairpin motor? And if people haven't seen that, that actually is one of, I think it's the second most popular video on my channel, which is crazy. It was just a month ago when I released. Yeah. So it's in the 135, 140,000 view range. But maybe one of the huge advantages of a hairpin motor is that you can manufacture it automatically very rapidly. So who knows how they're building these actuators, but they may be cheating and using some of that instead of the very complicated, time-consuming winding process. So
if they need it, and they're able to build it in a lab environment already, just with the normal equipment they have.
Right.
So it may not
but I'm
be
thinking
mass
manufacturing
scale. When they get ready to mass manufacture, it's pretty easy. And I think they're already able to make them at a reasonable clip, just like the artisanal way, which is not too bad. So they seem to be pretty involved. I mean, it looks like there's a lot of parts in there, but I think in the end, maybe there's not that much. They can actually manufacture it pretty easy. And then once you get that together, it snaps together pretty quick. I know. Did you want to get into, you know, the manufacturing of these, Randy? Was that what you wanted to lead to?
Well, ultimately, I might want to do that. Let's for now though, let's come back to maybe the bigger issues, the bigger questions. Again, contrary to my crazy, because you know I try to be as far outside the box as I possibly can. So the normal people in the room, we're saying this is a 5-year project, a 4-year project, a 3-year project. I'm wondering, you know, what did we learn in that 28 days? Because basically 28 days ago, I was kind of all by myself still. What did we learn in 28 days that would cause us to say, no, this, I mean, you just said a couple of the things, it's easier to put together than we thought, but what about the actual usability? Potentially, was there usability things that were not in our view 28 days ago that are in view now?
Well, I think we've learned a little bit more that the approach they're taking is sound and fundamental, you know, just based on the way AI has been progressing and some of the suspicions we had of whether they could get away with the hand that they had, because deep learning and AI can do quite a bit to fill in the lack of sensors and everything else. So I'm way more confident on that. I think what we've learned is more what we've relearned, that when you start to go back and look at everything, and then I go back to the AI Day 2 video, and you can see the evolution of what's going on with Optimus. And then I have to stop and then pinch myself and say, wait a minute, they started, when was it? Like March of last year or April of last year?
Yeah, we're talking about
how could they have done this much? You know, when they really get the team and they really start putting it together, they are really doing, I mean, they accomplish a lot really quickly because there were so many revisions. And I think they could see that they started something. And in the process of starting it, Elon said they could not find the servos. So you can see that Bumble C is a mix of servos they could buy. And I thought it was made up of all servos they get off the market, but it looks like they already realized this is not working. And they actually have a couple of those that might've been like the prototypes of the servos they were coming up with. So they already built that. That's pretty clear. You can kind of see that composite in there, that kind of Frankenstein sort of Optimus. And then they already have whatever the Optimus was, you know, the next version, the real Optimus, when they went away from the Bumble Cs that they rolled out on the stage, that was not the first version. That's already version 2. They already had the previous version that they were going through as kind of the pathfinder for everything. So you could see a lot of that. And a lot of the videos that they're putting are really, really dated. So the recruiting video that they had that they re-released in January, you think
Right.
that's up to date? And it's like, no, that's probably the version of Optimus or whatever they were doing back in June or July last year. It's not something
Right.
recent. You can see a lot just because, again, they're working on a very dated model. So I keep going back and I really wonder where they are. They are probably way further ahead than we think.
So I watched you, Scott, though, and it seemed like your aha day, your biggest aha. I think you had two. I think one of them was the quote from Milan Kovac, where you went back and you said, "Oh my gosh, I went back and I saw this quote. We're also going to start focusing on the real use case at one of our factories and really going to try to nail this down and run out all the elements needed to deploy this product in the real world." And I think you broke that particular quote. And I think you were surprised by that. And then I think it was only a few days later that you found the video of the Optimus working in a real factory setting. And I think you broke that as well. I think
that was always there because that was in the original AI day.
I mean, in other words, you broke it as
right.
as a meme, if you will.
Right, right.
And you were shocked. And you were shocked. You're like, oh my gosh, it's already potentially.
Yes, exactly. It's there. He basically kind of confirmed what we always said. And then if you go back and listen to Lizzie and Malcolm and some of the things they say, once again, they reinforce, it's going to be built with like the minimum number of parts. Malcolm is talking about, oh, we're simplifying everything so we can make 1 million of these. They just keep on saying the same things. To like, listen to them. Don't listen to Elon, listen to the team, and you'll find out what's going on. The other thing is, I asked John this earlier today, and I'm not 100% sure where the team is actually located in the Bay Area. Are they located in Palo Alto or are they located in Fremont? What do you think?
Well, my assumption had always been Palo Alto, which is where they're,
that's my assumption too. And where the watering jug and all that, where was that filmed?
I would assume, well, I don't know, but the factory.
It looks like an office, doesn't it?
Right.
With all the plants and the desks and stuff like that. Look closely again at the video and look at what's behind the black curtain.
Well, no, just look in the factory. I mean, as of September
30th. No, that's the whole thing. I have a feeling that they may have a substantial number of people actually in Fremont, in the factory.
Right.
That's where the team might be, because it's like it's not like, oh, we're going to build something over in Palo Alto and now drag it over to Fremont. It's like I think just about all the walking, everything you're seeing that's the lab. Fremont is the lab. That's the whole point. So when they're ready to test something, let's just go bring it on down there. And so I was looking at that and realizing, oh, I was assuming this was an office park off somewhere else, but now it looks like, and Joe Justice has said this, right? Where are the office spaces in Tesla?
Right. In the factory floor. Yeah.
They're always in the factory.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't, I could be completely wrong, but I was looking at that and realizing, oh, and if you do that, just think about, your iteration cycles.
Right.
In theory, Palo Alto and Fremont, I looked it up on Google Maps. It's like 30 minutes away.
Oh yeah.
Right. Bay Area. Sure. It's like, it's never going to happen. But so they're going to be over there.
And I think Lathrop is only 45 minutes to an hour away.
45 minutes. Yeah, right. Yeah. It's only 45 minutes, but maybe by helicopter.
2 o'clock in the morning. That's true.
Yes.
So, but let's just go one more step with Scott's insane theory, which actually could be very true. And that is that where would you want to have to build the part? Forget about putting him out on the factory floor and using him, but where would you want to build this thing? You want to build it where all of the machining tools are, right? Where is the machine?
Yeah.
Where are the machining tools? They're in the factory. Really logical sense.
It could still, you still could have something like that stuff in Palo Alto. I just don't know, what's there, but
they may have shifted over time. They might have done the original artisanal work, when they were just working on components and stuff in one place. But then once they're like, well, this is working pretty well, let's, move shop over here.
But there's a good chance, maybe they have teams in both, because they have to have some interface with the AI team, which I'm pretty sure is in Palo Alto. But I wouldn't be surprised that, you do have a around the clock kind of crew that's there that's maybe working on things and doing the testing.
So, okay, I'm going to put mine out there. My big aha moment, and maybe you guys will think I'm crazy, but you guys, that's why I have you on here, is to tell me I'm crazy. My big aha moment was when he picked up the drill motor and
Yeah, the
apply
nut runner.
the
Yep, the
right
nut runner. Yep.
amount of
Mhm.
pressure to the device to be able to screw down that bolt or whatever it was he was trying to screw down at
Mhm.
speed, as opposed to over tightening or not tightening at all or whatever. I mean, as a horrible carpenter, that's one of the hardest things to do of anything that you do for me in carpentry, except maybe a straight line with a circle saw, but it's really, really hard. So did that impress you guys at all that it could do that, or was that am I way off
Well,
base?
I mean, most of those nut runners have torque settings on them.
Mhm.
So, I mean,
Yep.
that part's not as impressive, but the fact that it's able to hold the drill straight and, because what happens is as soon as you push the trigger, it applies torque, which means you're going to go the opposite direction. So the fact that it's able to drive that in straight, and I'm assuming it's coming to a stop, which means the torque goes up at that point
Mhm.
before it starts clicking. I was going to say in my more general sense, if you want to ask another big revelation, and, I've been thinking about this more, is how important the brains are to this. Scott's talking, a lot of us talk about how rudimentary this thing is. And I'm not talking about it in a bad way, but I mean, it's put together easy, minimal number of actuators, minimal number of sensors, nothing fancy to it. And it's compensated for by the brain. And Scott, I haven't had a chance to look at that paper again, but the one that was it Google or was it OpenAI that did the Rubik's Cube? Did you ever?
I'm going to double check. It's one of those
okay. Well,
two.
anyway, but
I've got the
the
paper
basic
here.
idea here is that the hand doesn't have to be all that dexterous. It's all about it understanding what a Rubik's Cube is, how to manipulate it in space to get the right answer, to solve it and get the colors
It was
on the side.
OpenAI. It
was OpenAI. Okay. All right. For some reason, I had it stuck in my head as DeepMind. But anyway, regardless of that, it's that the ability of the brain of this thing, the neural network of it, to compensate for, just like us humans, we don't have that amazing of a machinery, but our brains are really amazing and we can manipulate our hands in impressive ways. So, yeah.
So Scott, you said you had some visuals. Did you have something in mind that you thought would be?
Of course I have vision. I mean, if we want to do like a look at the bill of materials and maybe how this whole thing would go together, just get an idea of what the construction would be like.
Really?
I've got enough of those things that will sort of look at the evolution of what's going on. How much time you got?
Well, so maybe I don't know. Maybe that's something we stop and do after John, because John has a limit on time.
Yeah.
Oh man, so I'm gonna have to watch it on the. I'll have to watch it.
You'll have to watch
And make sure to like and subscribe when you do it.
But I do have one question on that. So people have talked about it only costing $20,000 or $10,000. I started trying to. I'm a manufacturer for 30 years. I did plastics, but I haven't done much with metals. But I've worked with companies that have done metal. Why would it cost $10,000? I'm trying to figure this thing. I'm slowly but surely thinking it might cost $6,000, $5,000.
Well, okay. So we can break down a couple of the most expensive parts. The actuators are going to cost a good deal of money, but probably over time, not so much. And the batteries, I guess, won't cost that much, although they will a little bit. But the sort of full self-driving tech that is in Optimus, now maybe ultimately it'll be cheaper, but at least for the car, Monroe and Associates have broken it down as to being more than $2,000 just for that. So,
Just for the circuit board,
for the circuit board and the cameras and
but
all
it's
of
half.
that.
But remember, it's half of that.
That is true.
It only has one socket. It doesn't have two.
And it probably only has 4 cameras. So maybe we could reduce that from $2,000 down to $1,000. And, and metal is cheap, right? All of that kind of stuff. But so it's kind of like the actuators, the batteries, and the brains, and the sensors, of course, the cameras and stuff. So
and there's no exotic
I think
metals.
that's the determining factor of just how much it's going to cost.
Mm-hmm.
So am I crazy to think this might really have out the door of around $5,000 or $6,000, especially in quantities?
Yeah, it probably could. Once you get the quantities, I don't see why not, because I don't see that many parts or that much complexity. And not only that is the number of SKUs you have. It's got 28 actuators, structural actuators, not including the hands.
Right.
But of those, it's only a family. There's 6. That's it. So
Right.
you don't have 28 different SKUs for that. You have a line of only 6. that you're producing. That simplifies the cost. That reduces it. So yeah, I see the cost will go down significantly because of the simplification and the fact that it's truly designed for manufacture. I can already see some of the changes that they've made to make sure it can be built not only easily, but built by Optimus. It was already clear now when I reviewed the assembly video, that was like, oh, yep, there's the change. That is specifically done to make sure it can be done by Optimus.
So here's a major change with Tesla's automobile thing. And there's a logical difference to this, but they famously started Master Plan Part 1, expensive toy car, expensive mass market car and SUV, and then less expensive. And then of course, Gen 3, eventually we will get the very inexpensive car. But with the robots, there was no market that they had to break into, and they already have all this experience. So why not start at the ground level and build your, quote, Gen 3 robot, like the inexpensive? And they're already talking about building a freaking automobile for somewhere around $18,000 or $20,000, right? Half the price of manufacturing something for 36 is 18, and Elon has said half the price. So if they can build a car, for God's sakes, I mean, what is that? 3,000 plus pounds of stuff? If they can build that for 18 grand, yeah, I mean, a third of the cost of that for a robot that's human weight, 125 pounds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's over time. Now, obviously, we're not talking about initially. That's going to be very expensive initially. But if they build 1 million of these things, yeah, then we could be talking at $6,000-$7,000.
Yeah. All right. Well, so then another thing that, of course, I think the most mind-blowing generally that happened on ID Day, the thing that everybody is still talking about besides the bot itself, was the unboxed approach to building something. And so I already asked you, Scott, in another video, you may have talked about this elsewhere, but the bot is obviously something that is already designed for unboxed approach. I mean, sure, you could do it on a line. You could have it going down the line and you're putting on different parts as it goes down, and Lucy's down there and she's going to put the arm on, and, somebody else is. So, by the way, who was it that said, was that you, John, that said that the Lucy, no, that was Joe Justice, says that the Lucy video of her in the chocolate factory is something he uses in all of his classes.
No, that's me. That was me. I don't know about Joe. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It was not Joe.
Yeah.
Wow. Joe Justice and Scott Walter. Equals. All right. That's pretty
confused.
Cool. But that is true. It's such an instructive, it's like an instruction video. It's crazy.
So the robot could be made on a line like that. You could see it. It would be easy to think of it being made like that. But because of the nature of it, Scott, I think it was you that said, no, it's obviously, this is the perfect unboxed approach. Explain what you meant by that. I mean, perfect for using it as a.
Yeah, I mean, we've got basically 5 limbs. What's the 5th limb? The head, right? People don't realize that it's technically a limb. Okay. And the torso. So they just all get built off of the side. And the other thing is there's very little handedness. You don't have a left and a right leg. You have a leg, and you might have, even the feet look to be the same. They might just have like a different tread that you pop on it to make it look like it's left or right. The arms also seem to be extremely symmetric, and the only difference is going to be the hands, the mounting of the hands. So you don't really have a left arm line, or you have an arm line, you've got a leg line, you've got somewhere over there, someone's putting left and right hands. And then like I say, the feet, they look to be about the same. So again, that sort of simplifies everything. You don't have to worry about, oh, this guy didn't finish his task right in time, and now the whole line is slowing down. It's like, oh, just pull another one off and put it in there.
So in your mind, if it has an unboxed approach like that, would it be N number of cells of final putting it together? So you'd have all of these sort of feeders going into multiple cells, but then you just have a whole bunch of cells that were just next to each other, and the robots would walk themselves literally off yeah, you don't even have to take them off the line. You just stand them up and they walk over to where they're supposed to go. So.
Yeah. There's not going to be this assembly line. It's just probably going to be, oh, someone's right there, I'm going to put it together. Right. And they're just going to pull in. I mean, it might be that you have someone that's assembling arms, someone's assembling legs, someone that puts on the torso, but the whole thing is simple enough that I think one person could probably, given all the parts, just put it together themselves. Now,
Well,
whether that's the most efficient way, whether you want to keep someone kind of focused on one thing and that they just go ahead and have it, but actually the amount of labor, man hours that would go in putting it together is going to be pretty small. Not looking at, the cost of putting the servos together, but if you have all those components already at hand, it's going to be easier to put together than some IKEA furniture that I've had to deal with.
oh, not some. Oh,
Yes. Yeah.
These are all IKEA shelves, by the way. So I'm very empathetic to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. One last time around the room. Anything else that was just blew your mind that you've learned in the last 28 days that you recall? It was like, oh my gosh, this changes everything.
Well, I think, Randy, you're the one. It's your fault because you started off with 1,000 bots by the end of the year. And I was like, oh, that's ridiculous. And now, like, I think you've infected me. And so I'm like, yeah, 1,000 bots sounds completely reasonable. And and there was what Scott was saying was like, how do they absorb this and use them? But yeah, if you just, it's just like full self-driving. You've got to have a lot of cars on the road to collect the data. You need a lot of bots bumping into each other and falling over and doing whatever in order to collect the data you need to really teach it. And there's only so much you can do in the virtual world because it's not a perfect analog.
Well, and that reminds me that one of the big things for me on ID Day that I had never really thought about before was this downstreaming of their technology folks to their suppliers. I've said in almost every book that I've ever written about small business, I talk about suppliers being more important than customers. I've talked ad infinitum about how Costco is so completely different than any other mass marketer in terms of the way that they work with their suppliers and what that means and why it's important. But this was kind of eye-opening for me. I didn't know it was true for Tesla as much. And the idea now that would be a place for the next iteration of robots to go, or the next phalanx. What's the right word here?
I think that's about right. Robots. So before Scott jumps in with his thing, though, I want to respond to that because one thing that's really fascinating is, what do you both predict will be built? Not raw materials, but what actual items that go into Tesla Bot, aside from raw materials like just minerals and the chips, which they can't make themselves, what is going to be built by anybody except Tesla? Like, are they going to be wholly 100% vertically integrated and just do it themselves?
I think so.
Okay, well then who cares about the suppliers?
Oh, no, I'm saying the usefulness of the robot when it's finished. After they've deployed it throughout.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right.
They're going to send it out to their suppliers next.
Right.
Where they get the double benefit again of all the data coming in, as well as improving the efficiency of the supplier. I mean, that's huge. That's almost as big as some of the other things that we've talked about, is how they will deploy, I think, as soon as they possibly can to their suppliers.
Right.
Down to you, Scott. Any last?
Yeah, again, it just comes down to how fast they're moving.
All right.
I really see them moving fast.
How far behind are we? Like what we saw at Investor Day, the video that we saw, is that absolutely current stuff that was being worked on then? Or do you think that was delayed by several months and we weren't seeing the most up-to-date
At least weeks.
Okay. I think at Investor Day, we were seeing literally what was coming off the line, because they said, we didn't have this working before. This is the first time it's walked untethered. So I felt like we were getting a view of the current state of the art at September 30th.
Right.
The video, I feel like maybe they're hiding a little bit or pushing it back some.
They're not showing as much as they probably have been doing out there. So it may be a little bit more advanced than that, because they wanted to do this collage of everything that was in there to impress everyone, because probably showing it out in the factory, maybe the investors wouldn't quite understand it. And the theory I have is that was the first time Elon ever saw that video.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Because you notice he came up there and the shop was like, oh, the video is there. And Elon was, oh, and he turns and he puts it on there and he doesn't have anything to say. And then he just starts saying some stuff. And he says something that was kind of curious, of like, we have lots of arms and legs and other ones, I suppose. He like said, the way he said the suppose, like he wasn't sure himself, how many they have, because he's been too busy over at Twitter and other stuff to really, remember everything. And then as he was speaking over the whole thing, there was one point he was ready to make, and he clearly they maybe talked to him about a video that they were going to do, but he hadn't seen the end. And remember when they pulled the black drape off of the family portrait that's there? Elon's about to say something, and all of a sudden he breaks out in laughter.
Right.
And then he doesn't have anything to say. He's like, it just completely threw him off. And then he says, oh, they were a good AI team or something like that. But his train of thought was completely broken because it was so funny. And he was trying to contain himself. I was like, that's the first time he ever saw it. Look at it again and you will get the impression.
Just if you watch the 10 minutes before leading into it, it's so obviously shoehorned in. Whoever produced the video got it done like with minutes to spare. And they're like, just throw it in after this thing, put it in there.
And surprise them. Yeah.
And they were so proud of themselves that Elon had never seen it. And, it was so awkward. It just didn't fit with the whole rest of Investor Day. But I'm like, that may be the happiest part of the whole thing was like, oh, look, this is awesome.
The question is whether they really had finished it at 10 a.m. in the morning and to get it ready, or whether it had been in the can for a month and they just wanted to surprise Elon. It was, it's a practical joke, and then throw us off because it's like, we're way past there, because maybe the whole thing was back in December and what they're going to do. Let's go ahead and set it up, and they had to get it right. Meanwhile, the other team is going off somewhere else. Yeah, you can have the old Optimi. You guys play with it, whatever you want. We're doing real work over here. All right. So it could be that.
All right, we're gonna end this episode right now, because we're gonna do another episode that I believe will come out on Saturday morning. And on Saturday morning, if you subscribe and you hit notify, you'll be notified of this video. We're gonna talk about something that I just did a video on Tuesday about, which will be producing revenue first, Robotaxi or Optimus the robot. So you want to be sure and come back for that. Thank you guys for being here today. And it's, as usual, been great talking to you.
Thanks.